Reaper and Mei are absolutely insane right now. Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to the channel. I'm Stylosa and I'm joined by the magnificent
one amongst many. And yeah, these two heroes are kind of terrifying for everyone to deal with. They are true, like they're the most evil partnership in Overwatch, right? Reaper and Mei. They are just like marish at times and can completely take over games. Sty, what's going on?
Well, Reaper is incredibly strong. At lower ranks, like we're talking from bronze to gold. Reaper is just an absolute monster. Like, he destroys people just because teams don't really know how to deal with him. They just ignore him. They let him do whatever he wants to do. And he just walks around killing people. And it's ridiculous. Mei is a little bit more complicated. But yeah, we'll get on to Mei in a second. What we need to realize here, though, guys, is these heroes were buffed to combat goats. Now, Josh, remind me how long we've been living in a 2-2-2 world without goats.
Specific dates? I don't know off the top of my head, but at least a couple of months. Like, we've moved away from goats for a while now. Goats existed for years and years. Well, it feels like years and years. It existed for months and months and months and months and months and months. And everyone was crying out, please, please save us from the goats. We want to play DPS heroes. And Blizzard were like, okay, we're going to tinker with Reaper and Mei and make them work. And then D.Va existed and Reaper sort of stopped working, and Mei just never kind of got strong enough. Kind of had a couple of moments where she could kind of work, but Goats was just a little bit too quick, a little bit too mobile, and so no one really gave a heck about Mei. But now, well, we're forced into 2-2-2, and they've really buffed Reaper over time, and now he can get anywhere and do anything basically for free because, well, if he messes up, he's got this spooky ghost form where he can just wraith walk out and just get out completely scot-free and do whatever he likes. And yeah, it's kind of a problem, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're very similar, Mei and Reaper, in a lot of ways. Like, they've both got a get out of jail card. They're both very good at close range. They're both highly disruptive to tank play. And when you look at the game right now, barriers are weaker. Tanks have got slightly more armor, but barriers are weaker. So Reaper can get in there, delete barriers faster if he needs to, but he's not really generally used to delete barriers. It's just when he's in a brawl, he's just absolutely unstoppable, and he gets tons of value. As you touched on, you don't see D.Va anymore, so, well, who really stops Reaper? Like, the only way to deal with him is to kill him. When he comes in, you have to go, oh, let's kill the Reaper. But the thing is, because Reaper had the buff to his Shadow Step, where it's faster, and he can do it when he jumps, which is actually kind of cool. But also, it's much quieter. So you don't know Reaper's behind you until he starts unloading into the back of your head. You're like, oh God, I'm dead. And on ladder, flanking heroes are actually pretty good at cheesing your way through the ranks. Now, this is like a pro tip, ladies and gentlemen, a pro terrible tip. Just play Reaper and Hog and flank all day. And you'll get loads of kills. And you'll be like, I'm amazing. And then you'll hit a point where people just realize what you're doing. And then you're not amazing anymore. But it is super strong. But what we've got are two heroes that were buffed to counter goats. Now, what really perplexes me is Blizzard must have been working on 2-2-2 when they started buffing Zarya. Not Zarya. Why the hell have I got Zarya in my head? When they Zarya is just a legend. That's why I've got her in my head. When they started buffing Reaper and Mei to counter goats, they must have known they were working on 2-2-2. So then 2-2-2 comes out a few months later. Then goats, you just physically cannot run that comp anymore because you've got the restrictions on heroes that you can select. And then you look at Mei. And Mei has got multi-freeze on a primary fire. That was completely put into the game to try and control all these tanks that came rushing in.
Yeah.
But now Mei's still got this.
Yeah, exactly. The way you played Goats was just a big ball of tanks and supports, and you ran in, and the idea was that, oh, yes, Mei, you put your endothermic blaster or whatever through all of them, and you freeze all of them up, and then you can get some kills and get some results. But what she's got now is she still has that multi-freeze mechanic. If you're freezing someone and there's someone behind them, you freeze both of them. And it just kind of makes it feel like, well, she's just an impenetrable nightmare. Like, you try and run through a choke point that Mei is working on, and she's got the wall, she's got the multi-freeze, tanks can't stop her from freezing people, and on top of that as well, her endothermic blaster, like, this has always worked like this, but it's extremely powerful, which is Blizzard stacks with the blaster. So if she throws down Blizzard and tries to freeze you, you freeze in a cold snap. It's brutal to try and deal with. It makes that ult, it makes that ult so powerful.
Yeah, no, the ult is super good. Like, talk about a right click as well. I mean, it's McCree's right click without damage drop off. You're just firing it everywhere.
Real good. It's real good spamming, and you just sort of spam it into the enemy team. It's not that accurate. It's a little bit clunky to use, but it will get you rewarded for just putting it into the enemy team if they're clumped up, and if you can find a way past the barriers, which you can now, then yeah, it's going to be a problem. So Mei's she's one of those heroes that is very good at close range, but she's also got good medium range options. It's not difficult to get her into close range, and she's just also kind of frustrating to fight against. Like, if a Mei gets to you, I don't feel outplayed necessarily, and I know she's like about positioning, about control, but it's so easy to get in now these days that maybe it's just a little bit too easy for her to get that value, and you end up getting frozen, you end up just getting blown up, and it's just like, oh well, I've just been outskilled. Feels bad, man. Like, how do you stop that? How do we fix Mei? First of all,
the issue with Mei is Mei's wall is really good, but this has always been the case. Even if you go back throughout Overwatch League, even the first year of Overwatch League, you'll see on Command Center on Lijiang, Mei was used a fair amount, but Mei is very effective there just because you can cut people off so effectively, right? The team come in, you cut the team in half, you kill them, or you just cut the Reinhardt off, you kill them. You would see this on King's Row first point. You probably still see this now on Ladder. Cut off the Reinhardt as he comes through, catches the enemy off guard. The enemy then need to change their comp. If they don't, you'll just keep repeatedly walling them off. So wall has always been a really good ability. It could easily be one of the best abilities in Overwatch. I mean, it's crazy when you think about it. You know, hell, I remember when Mei was, the trailer was shown for Mei, and to have a wall in an FPS game was crazy. It's like, hold up, she can just create a wall. That is insanely powerful. And it almost feels like it's taken some time for it to like really come to the forefront. But what I think's happened is because barriers are so weak now, well, Mei is a DPS who's actually really tanky and has this deployable barrier, which is really good. Like, really, really good. And she can shove it in your face, and you can use it as a defensive option. You can use it offensively to cut enemy teams up. You see a lot of stuff like you go in with the barrier, you cut the enemy team up, you throw your Blizzard down in the barrier, like at your wall. I'm getting confused with barrier and wall, but you throw it at your wall, freezes them, and as Josh, you said, you just start spraying your primary fire, instantly freezing them, your team will just wipe them out. She's really good, but like, you see more Reinhardt now, and Mei's really good at dealing with Reinhardt. You see more Hammond. Mei is actually fairly effective against Hammond. If Hammond comes into a Mei, like into the team, and Mei's in there, and he pile drives in, all you have to do as the Mei is throw up a wall so he can't escape, and then freeze him. And even if your wall's on cooldown, you freeze him, and your team will put damage into him. Might not be enough to kill him, but it's very effective. So what you've got is this 250 HP hero with an invuln ability, so she can get herself out of jail, which heals her as well, and makes her, well, obviously immune to damage. She's got a deployable wall. She's got a very good right click or alternate fire, which is very good. It's like a McCree mini Hanzo thing, isn't it? You just spam it away, hope for the best. It can produce results sometimes. Other times, maybe you don't get too much done with it. Primary fire is really effective when the game breaks down into this brawl. And this sort of goes on to the whole thing of like, what's going on with the meta? Is it more of like a deathmatchy style thing we're in now? If that's the case, and it kind of feels like that's the case, Mei's really good. Like, Mei is just incredibly good.
And Reaper has exactly the same sort of thing. It's both of them are what I would class as like anti-tank heroes. Like, Mei controls tanks. She's there to like split tanks off and slow them down and lock them in place for the team to kill. But she's also just really good against DPS and support. Like, if you're a DPS and you get caught by the Mei,
it's
then
hard to kill Mei.
Yeah, you know the nightmare situation. You've got to like flashbang her or something to be able to deal with her. You've got to like have that hard stun to stop her from just walling herself off and getting away, or ice blocking and waiting for the team, or any number of other escape options. Reaper is the same. He comes in, he shadow steps in, and the way that shadow step works right now is when you're coming out of shadow step, like, you can't see the Reaper, but he's already out of shadow step, like, as he's becoming visible. And that's where it gets really tricky to like punish him for doing that and headshot him for doing that. There's a really finicky timing to it that you've got to kind of just spend time and practice learning, which most people haven't done. And if you don't do that, he just shadow steps in, fires a couple of shots, maybe assassinates one of your supports, assassinates a DPS, does a ton of damage to a tank, causes massive confusion, and then just Wraith forms out. And it's like, to stop that, you need to stun him, but do we want Overwatch to be about, oh, well, we've got to have the crowd control available to do that? Is that really sort of what we want? And it feels like both of these heroes... Yeah. Go on. No, go on.
Okay, I love it. I think like with Reaper, like, it's not always about flanking with him as well. Like, you just go into the fight with Reaper, like, you smash into the enemy team, and Reaper will shadow step in the fight. So you're on the front line, you're piling into the tanks, and then you use shadow step to go straight into the back line. And because this is like the commotion of the fight, the enemy team generally, like, it's difficult to pick this up because suddenly he's behind the team, then he's firing into, like, your backline. It's like, oh my god, this Reaper's everywhere, and he's causing loads of problems. It's like you can do this with his ultimate, and it's actually really effective to do this with the ulti. I was watching the Breaking Barriers tournament, and there was a couple of teams that were doing this on King's Row. They would, like, on the final point, they would just pick Reaper, rush into the enemy team, and all they were doing was trying to charge up Reaper's ultimate. And as soon as he got the ulti, they would go into the fight. Reaper's on the front line. Then he uses Shadow Step to go into the back line as the fight breaks out and just pops his ulti. And it's like, what? Like, it just comes out of nowhere. You're like, oh my god, we're dead. The back line is literally dead. How do we survive this? Or if the team turn around to deal with it, of course, your team are still pushing into the enemy team. Like, it's really funny when you think about these two heroes because they were buffed to counter something that Blizzard knew they were removing from the game. So you would think Blizzard would come back and go, hang on, we need to change the way these heroes work. But I've got a really funny little thing. Now, Mei in Overwatch 2 needs the multi-freeze as she's not viable on the Rio de Janeiro mission. So there you go, right? But that's PvE, right? Yeah. So why should that even affect PvP?
Exactly. They can change the rules for that.
Yeah, but like you can see that what they've done is almost like they've gave Mei the multi-freeze, and then when they're doing the testing and the designing for Overwatch 2 mission, they're like, oh wow, this works great in the mission, and kind of just kept moving on.
Yeah.
But it's like Mei is here right now with multi-freeze, which is just really good, like really, really good. Like the thing, when we look at these heroes, it's how do you counter them? Like what is, if I ask you right now, what is the counter to Reaper and what is the counter to Mei?
Yeah,
it's a Reaper and a Mei. It's a
It's
Reaper and a Mei. Or a Hanzo getting lucky.
Like a very observant McCree just babysitting the backline, maybe. Here's the thing, like when they first buffed Shadow Step, one of the coolest things I saw Reaper players start doing was they were teleporting next to like Widowmakers, for example, and fighting the Widow. And I think that's a really cool use of that ability. I think that's great. To me, the problem is when they start doing that and they're fighting stuff like soldiers and McCrees and things like that, where it's like they have no fear of normal actual DPS. Like Widow shouldn't be able to go toe-to-toe with Reaper at close range. That 100% makes sense. That's great. But when he starts going in and just getting like free access to everyone else and starts fighting everyone else, that starts becoming the problem. And like the only counters I can think of, like if they're playing a very aggressive Mei Reaper and like a super aggressive Reinhardt or maybe like a Hammond or something, sure, as a support player I'm going, I might pick Brig here. Like I might just need that stun and want that stun to push them out and be able to knock them away, or like a Lucio and boot them out and try and control them that way. But it feels like they're getting in too easily. It feels like they're getting in too much for free. Maybe they just need to change Wraith form and make it so that he only takes like 50% damage or even like 30% damage while in Wraith form. But suddenly it becomes this massive thing that, oh, I need to be careful still. I can't just go in, drop down to 1 hit point, and then Wraith walk out for free. I now need to really think about what I'm doing. And I think that's going to be a recurring problem, is there's a couple of heroes in the game right now that can get access to where they're strong and not be punished for it. So Reaper and Mei are great examples. Doomfist is another great example. Hanzo is another great example. All of these heroes are very powerful at the moment because they can get to where they're strong without any kind of penalty for doing that. The two we're talking about right now, they can get to close range, make them wall, like you said, use it as a defensive option, use it as an extra barrier.
Overwatch is a game, it's a game about objectives, and you're always fighting over an objective to some extent. So these heroes are really good at fighting over an objective because they want you in close range, they want to be brawling, and most of Overwatch, that's what it is. So it's these heroes are almost perfectly built for the game, but the problem we get is, how do you counter these heroes? Well, if it falls back to just selecting them on your team and hoping your Mei and Reaper are more effective, then that's just not great balance. All right, guys, let us know what you think about this in the comments below, especially if you are a Reaper or a Mei main. I would really like to know from Reapers that have played in, let's say, Gold, Plat, maybe even Diamond. You hit a wall at some point, and I want you to tell me why you think you've hit that wall, because I've seen Reapers in games that I've played in where you can tell they are playing a certain way, which is very effective at lower ranks because they're not getting punished for it. But as soon as teams maybe have like a slightly better McCree or something that, you know, the team at least try and deal with the Reaper, they kind of get stuck. And it's at that point, like, how do you change your gameplay to sort of deal with that? But just let us know what you think about these heroes overall anyway, guys. I think it's a really interesting debate. Like, Mei is a tank. I'm 100% going to say that. And Reaper is just, well, yeah, they're really good, these heroes are. All right, guys, you can follow me on Twitter, which is @Stylosa. It's also @Stylosa on Instagram, and you can catch Josh on
@1_amongst many on Twitter and twitch.tv/1amongst many TV on Twitch.
All right, guys, we'll catch you on the next one. Toodaloo.
Bye.